And welcome to another episode of Interludes with Chris Mackenzie. And today I would like to welcome very much to Golden Days Radio Bill Akers, who has been a director of productions and lighting designer for the Australian Ballet for many years, as well as being trained as an actor, a dancer and a singer. Bill Akers, welcome to Golden Days Radio.
Thank you very much for asking me.
I'm looking forward to this very much. Can we start at the beginning? Where you were an actor, I think, in Sydney, wasn't it? You're a Sydney boy, basically.
Well,
originally.
I became an actor. Yes, I'm a Sydney boy. I was born in the non-salubrious suburb of Redfern, and then went to live in the country. And after the marriage breakup of my father and mother, I was taken to live with my Aunt Bess. And my Aunt Bess was something of a mystery and a character and a wonderful figure in our family, because she was the only person in the family who had diamonds and silver fox furs and beautiful Cornelli work frocks and lots of money, and none of us knew where the money came from. And I was, and you're wrong, I went to live with Aunt Bess, and the second day that I was there, I was given drill. And drill consisted of lining up with her three children and being taught where all the false tables sides were, how to take the rubbish bins out of the rubbish bins because they were only 3 inches deep, and even the lavatory seat cover you could unzip, and these were all places where you could hide betting slips because Aunt Bess was running the biggest SP bookmaking shop in Sydney. And so the police would ring up to tell us when they were coming, you see, and we would have cockatoos on the corner, and the police would arrive, and Aunt Bess would slip them the 400 quid that was in the envelope, but we would be lined up and they'd say, now, you children have not seen anyone placing betting slips around here, and we'd all lined up and we'd say, like the Trapp family singers, no, Captain. We were taught to call all policemen Captain, and they would go away, you see. And well, I grew up in this rather theatrical atmosphere, and when Aunt Bess passed on, I went to live with Aunt Mary, and during the time of Aunt Mary, I went and auditioned. Well, by accident, I was in the YMCA, and I was a gym instructor and club leader at the time. And another chap was also doing the same work, and he was a radio announcer. His name was Bill Akers. He subsequently joined the House of Reprehensibles in Canberra, and he got murdered in the long run. But it was a terrible sort of situation, but at the time he was very much alive. And he rang this evening, an actor had not turned up for an interview, and he said, Bill, I don't suppose you'd come down and do it. And with characteristic reluctance, I raced down George Street into Pitt Street, up into Studio 149, and was on air 1 minute later. I hadn't the faintest idea what I was doing. They just said, anything that says A is you. So I thought, A is you. I didn't get it. I thought it was an alphabetical joke. And I saw Q and A, and I thought, oh, yes. So I did all the answering. And the following Tuesday morning, they rang and asked me, would I do it every Friday night? I got a year's contract out of it. So
how old were you by this time?
15, 16.
Right, okay.
And it was called Over to Youth, the show. So that was about what young people did to get jobs and all the rest of that. And at the end of that, of course, the bug had bitten truly, and I rang Mr. Keith Wood, who was the producer of the show, and said, I want to be an actor. And he said, well, if you want to be an actor, the first thing you have to do is something about that terrible voice. Well, I had a voice at the time that was very Australian and so high that only dogs could hear it. And so I spoke to, he sent me rather to a man called, I can't think of his name, but he was the voice production coach, a wonderful one. And he was married to Aunt Jenny. And Aunt Jenny was a famous radio announcer lady that came on of a morning and advertised Actil guaranteed sheets and pillow slips, guaranteed 99 inches wide, will not fade, tear or shrink. Well, and she boasted that she'd had these in her a set of these in her family for 90 years, and they were still in perfect condition. And I didn't know whether that was because she washed them in Persil or the lack of activity in between them. But it was really, she was a delightful person. And anyway, this man, Bryson Taylor, his name was, I went to him knocked at his door. He was very elegant, and he asked me to come inside. And he said, "Now, what can I do for you?" And I could hardly open my mouth. I was so stunned by the beauty of his voice and this horror of mine. And I told him what he could do for me, I hope. And he said, "Have a cup of tea." We had a cup of tea, and at the end of it he said, "Look, I'm sure you're very talented, but I'm afraid nobody could ever do anything with that voice." I've never drunk tea since. I went down, not realising one of those wonderful accidents that happened in my life was just 3 floors below where he was, because I'd gone to school with a boy called John Langley, who was also in the YMCA, and he was studying to be an actor at a school. And I went to take him to lunch. I was the assistant sales manager of a timber firm at the time. And I went to take him to lunch one day, and I walked in the door and sat down on a stool, and there was an office in front of me and a door leading into another room, which I hadn't been into. And this extraordinary woman came through the door, and she had a cigarette sticking out of her mouth, and she was what my aunt would describe as being well stayed. She was a large lady, and this great bosom sort of headed towards me, and she grabbed me and said, you'll do, come with me." Well, not knowing what I would do, I went with her into a studio with a small stage at one end, and on it was this boy I'd gone to school with that I was supposed to be taking to lunch, and a lot of people down the other end who had notes and pencils and things like this, one of whom I recognised as Neva Carr-Glynn, who was quite a famous radio actress and stage actress at the time. I had a script thrust into my hand, and this woman said, "Go up onto the stage and read that with him." So I thought, these people are mad, And I went up onto the stage and flung myself into this scene, sight reading, into this scene, you see, and woke up sort of 5 minutes later hanging round John Langley's neck with tears streaming down my face, realising that I'd just begged for my life in the assumed personage of Catherine of Aragon. It was, something of a start. I didn't go to lunch that day. I just went away mystified, and about a week and a half later, I got a letter from them saying I'd just won a 3-year scholarship to the school. She thought I was the next applicant, and I wasn't. However, I did that, and at the school at that time, there were wonderful people there, and some very funny people like Joan Sutherland and all the rest of that, and we didn't even know who she was. We had a scene to do. Oh, well, I won't tell you that story. I'll tell you another time. She's still alive. I'd better not do these things. And I graduated from there and went into the Alden Shakespeare, immediately taken into the Alden Shakespeare Company, which was another accident because as part of the prize, of the graduation prize, and I won it, it was an audition with the John Alden Shakespeare Company, and everybody in Australia and from overseas wanted to be in that company. It was a wonderful company, had great artists in it, and John was a tremendous actor and director. And I went to the independent theatre, into a solitary spotlight in the centre of the stage, and the voice from the darkness said, "Well, Bill, what are you going to do for us today?" And I said, I was very nervous, and I said, "I'm going to do the confrontation speech from Richard III and a piece of Julian Slade." And he said, "No, don't do that. That's comedy, and we know you can do that. Do the confrontation speech, and then I'd like you to do the I Know a Bank speech from Midsummer Night's Dream." And I said, "Oh, I don't think I'd remember it." He said, "Never mind, the stage manager has a book open in the corner." So I thought, that's straight. Why would you say that? Anyway, I did the confrontation speech and got through it reasonably well. And he said, I went to the stage manager and had a look at the book, and I thought, "Oh, I think I do remember it." And I went out and I did the I Know a Bank, all that speech. And at the end of it, this voice from the stall said, "Well, we've come a long way, haven't we?" And I said, "Excuse me, but am I speaking to Mr. John Alden?" And he said, "Yes, you are." He walked out of the darkness into the light, and John Alden turned out to be a man called Gordon Buchanan, who had been my literature teacher at school when I was 10 and 11 and 12, and he had directed a production of Midsummer Night's Dream in which I played Oberon. Eventually, I actually played Oberon in his company because Max Oldacre was hermetically sealed.
Oh, really? Listen, we're going to play some music now.
All right.
Something by Paul Robeson. You have a great love for the wonderful voice of Paul Robeson.
I think he has the most wonderful voice I think I've ever heard. And I first heard it when I was about 11, and I immediately fell in love with the voice because my own was so terrible. And then I saw the film, and it gave me a great appreciation of voice. And I think that Paul Robeson is the John Gielgud of singing.
So from the Sounders of the River, the Cargo Lullaby.
river of sleep flows gentle and deep to rock you to rest. So sleep, little one, till darkness is by. Sleep till the sun rises up in the sky. My little black dove, curl up in your nest of love and go to your rest, asleep at my breast, my little black dove.
The magnificent voice of Paul Robeson and the Congo Lullaby from Sounders of the River. Your choice. Wonderful,
Yes.
Wonderful voice. Anyone's choice.
I'm still
I mean,
crying. I can't hear it. Going wet at the eyes.
all overcome
Yeah.
here. So listen, let's continue. You found yourself in the Olden.
Yes, we toured for about 14 months. It was a tremendously successful company. We were of doubt, of course, a Shakespeare company travelling around. So we went to the Comedy Theatre first in Melbourne and opened there to very, very good notices, but not too many good houses. But we had enough money to get us to Brisbane, where we thought, we thought, Brisbane, Shakespeare, what? And we got there, so we thought we'd get, the big number over first. So we put on King Lear firstly, thinking they'd stay away in their thousands, greet us with roars of apathy. But on the contrary, their papers came out raving the next day, sort of saying how wonderful it was. But they played up the blood and thunder angle of Lear because you couldn't get in. That was it. And The Dream was a riotous success. It was absolutely wonderful. And that's where I got the opportunity to play Oberon, because Max Oldacre was ill. And I'd been to the Valley to the pictures in the afternoon between matinee and evening performance, and came back with the boy who was actually understudying him. And when we got back, because we hadn't had any understudy rehearsals by then, we got back, and the director James Mills and Neva were waiting. She was Titania, was waiting at the stage door. Where have you been? Where have you been? And I said, well, I've got 5 minutes to call the half. And he said, no, Hal, you're on. And Hal said, what do you mean I'm on? He said, well, you're on. He said, because Max Oldacre's often Hal fainted. So
not a good start to his career.
Well, he went very pale and swooned. and he said, I don't know a word of it, because he was playing another role in it. I was directing and choreographing the ballets as well. And this was only the second performance. We opened on the Friday night. This was Saturday afternoon, well, the third performance, actually. And when Hal was being sort of revived to some degree, Neva and James Mills said, well, we've got a packed house. We'll have to cancel. Which for us was a tragedy, of course, because we were getting money in to continue the company, and was doing very well, and we didn't want to let the public down. And Neva suddenly said, I think Bill actually knows the role. And I went, and James looked at me and said, well, do you? And I said, well, yes. Because I was stage managing, I knew every role. I could have started and recited the whole play. I still could, I think. And he said, well, you're on. Come up onto the stage and do the I Know a Bank speech. And I thought, here I go again. So I went up and did the I Know a Bank speech. And he said, right, you're on. And I said, no, Mr. Mills, I'm not on. I'm not obliged to go on. I will go on some conditions. You're not here to make conditions, he said. And I said, no, but I can't wear Max Oldaker's size 9 boots. I take 6s. And I've got to run up and down rostrums and things like that. And these great flying wings that he wore with trailing things behind. Somebody's have to put all those up. And Hal can do my makeup because he's brilliant at it. And I know exactly what I want to look like. I'd seen a photograph of Bobby Hiltman playing the same role.
All right.
So they did all that, and I was on, and I played it all that week for the rest of the season, and got a lovely note from Max saying, thank you for helping me out when I was hermetically sealed. So, well, the Alden Company went on, as I say, for 14 years, and I was put under contract by J.C. Williamson's, which was unusual because they didn't take many contract actors, but there were a number of us, and so that it meant they could do anything with me that they wanted. I could be a stage manager one week, a choreographer the next, a singer, a dancer, an actor, whatever they wanted, you did. And at the time, you sort of resented it. But when you look back after a little while, you suddenly realise that it's given you so much experience across the board that you really can do anything if you're called upon to do. If anybody asked me to choreograph a ballet today, I'd faint. But at the age of 20, you'll do anything you're asked to do.
Yes.
And we went along, through there, and I did some plays with Jesse Matthews, and 3 plays I think I did with Jesse Matthews, and then a play with Frank Thring.
Which of those did you do? Can you remember?
It was called The Square Ring. It was a boxing play, and it was put on by Ken Brodjack, dear Ken Brodjack, and the boy who was playing the lead in it was supposed to play his role in Welsh because it was a very sympathetic role, and that's a very sympathetic accent. And I was called Rowdy, who was a North Country boy, like that. And of course he was called Rowdy because he never said anything. Every now and again he'd have a one-liner which would stop the play. It was hilariously funny, but it had to be delivered in that accent. Mm-hmm. And the point about it, so the boy could only do that accent, so I couldn't do it I think I tried every accent. I think I was the first one, to attempt Bronx. And it didn't work in any way at all. And in the end, I got myself out of it. And Frank Thring and I have the same birthday. We had the same birthday. And a mutual friend of ours, Mrs. Gunness, used to have a party. And Frank would arrive at the party after his show, and I would arrive after mine. And he would all say to me, "Hello, darling, done any bad acting lately?"
Thank you
Lay me out all over the place.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
We were great friends, actually. He was a wonderful man, Frank.
Now we've got some more music. This is very appropriate. It's Anthony Warlow. He's going to sing On the Boards.
When I was a lad, I often dreamed of a career. I really didn't have to dream too far. 'Cause Mum and Dad were on the stage. It all seemed very clear that I'd go on the boards and be a star. I practiced every number till I knew 'em all by heart. I memorised the witty repartee. One day I told me father, "Dad, it's time for me to start." And this is what my mother said to me. Life's a bed of roses till the show you're doing closes. On the boards, on the boards. Every shining hour brings a shower of rewards. If you think it funny, get it laughs instead of money. On the boards, ha-ha, those boards. Where else can you draw blood with rubber swords? If you wanna have a mess of custard busted in your face, go on the boards, go on the boards. To live like lords, go on the boards. On the other hand, If you want a cosy life, a house, a mortgage and a wife, a little Sunday golfing and a beer, all those sweet suburban joys, the poker sessions with the boys, and a baby every other year. Drive a lorry, dig a quarry, push a barrel around, fix a faucet, sell a corset, drill a hole in the ground. At least you know you'll get your dough when payday comes around. If you want a cosy, dozy life. On the other hand, life is rich and golden till your masterpiece starts folding on the boards, on the boards. One day you're an idol on the tidal of fame. Next day you're forgotten when the critics flay you rotten and proclaim that you're to blame for getting even how to spell your name. If you want to find out quickly who are friends and who are frauds, go on the boards. Go on the hello darling, you were super. What a bloody ball to mix with frauds. Go on the boards, 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 boards. On the other hand, I'd rather starve in makeup than to wake up as a clerk. I love those balls, those rich walls, those rubber soles, the altar brawls.
What a wonderful tune.
What a fantastic line.
What
I'd
a
rather die in makeup than wake up as a clerk.
Yes.
I tell you what, that's a line, isn't it?
Oh, wonderful.
He's got such a wonderful voice. He can do anything with it. I think the man's, virtually a genius. I've heard him sing so many things. I admired him in the theatre. He's a wonderful actor. I've seen him in opera. He's just an amazing artist.
Isn't he? Anthony Warlow. And
Yeah.
yes, and we nearly lost him too, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
We
but
did.
No.
But he's going strong.
I'd have shot
wonderful.
God if we'd lost him, I can tell you.
Righto. Now listen, we're beginning to sort of almost run out of time. But tell me more about your sojourn with the Alden group. But you're about to leave, aren't you, and do something different with the Williamsons?
Yes, I went to Williamson's under contract and then did a number of plays and then was leased out by Williamson's to a couple of other managements, then back to Williamson's to do a play called For Better For Worse, which turned out the latter. And then I went back into radio. And I was in radio for, it was about 6 months I was doing radio, but I was on a retainer from Williamson's anyway.
Yeah.
And you could make quite a lot of money in radio. I was in everything from Blue Hills to sort of Dad and Dave,
Really?
you name it. And I was doing that, and when I came home, actors in radio in Sydney never work on a Friday afternoon. They don't in the theatre either. It's payday, sort of, and if you were the type of actor who likes a drink, and I wasn't then, and I'm sure you'd get that, and you went to Bondi and made your tan good in case you got a film, because I did quite a lot of it. There was a very thriving film industry going in this country at the time, but most of it was for...
What sort of years are you talking about now? Approximately.
1953, 4, 5, 6,
Yes,
7.
right.
And a lot of the films were made and directed by a man called Lee Robinson, who worked for the government, and these films were made for overseas consumption. I remember one of them was called Xenophobia, and I made the whole film and I didn't know what xenophobia was. It was extraordinary. But you got paid wonderful money for it, and Doc Sternberg used to make films as well. I did 2 or 3 with him, and life was easy. Bondi Beach on Friday and radio studios all the rest of the week.
Oh, it's tough, eh?
Yes.
Oh,
And
yes.
it was great fun. We were working with people like John Mellion and Neva and all the great radio people, and they were all very kind to you. They were very helpful and encouraging. Wonderful ABC directors who used to encourage you and give you jobs, and so I did all of that, and I got home one Friday afternoon, and on my notice board was a message to please ring urgently Mr. Harold Bowden. Well, Harold Bowden was J.C. Williamson's general manager in Sydney, and it was a bit like getting a call from God,
Yes.
Now, I rang up rather nervously, and his secretary, Miss Cathy, said, Mr. Akers, he's been trying to get you all the afternoon. And I said, I've been working. Lying my teeth out. And so she put me straight through, and he said, good afternoon, Akers. Yes. You step a bit, don't you? It's Harold Bowden here from J.C. Williamson's. And I said, yes, Mr. Bowden, I step a bit. You mean dancing, I assume? And he said, I do. And I said, yes, I do, but I don't want to be a dancer, Mr. Bowden. He said, you'll do what we tell you. I want you to go to Melbourne, to ASM, the Borovansky Ballet. And I said, no, thank you, Mr. Bowden, if you don't mind. I'm engaged to a girl called June Ashley at the moment, and she's been in the Borovansky Ballet. I know all about Mr. Borovansky. I don't want anything to do with him if you don't. He said, Akers, it is Harold Bowden of J.C. Williamson's here. And I said, yes, Mr. Bowden, but I really don't want... Well, when I started the following Monday, I walked through the stage door of Her Majesty's Theatre and was confronted by these 50 raging egos jumping up and down, turning around in the air. And I thought, oh, my God, what have I done? There I was, immaculately clad in a beautiful suit with a diamond pin, not a real one at the time, they're real now. And standing there looking like this, and there's this man on a chair down the front jumping up and down in a pair of ballet slippers, a pair of baggy trousers, a Bonds athletic singlet and a beret on the back of his head, screaming imprecations at these dancers, you see. And suddenly he looked over and he saw, and the whole rehearsal stopped, and I thought, God, he's going to come talk to me. Well, he did. He came over and he said, are you the new assistant stage manager? And I said, yes. I said, yes, sir. And he said, don't call me sir, I'm not English. I said, I'm not English either, sir. And he said, this became a joke between us after a while. Well, Mr. Borovansky, was a wonderful man. I'd be serious for a minute, because I think he's the greatest theatre personality that has ever happened in Australia, because he even Bobby Helpman, but because Borrow did such an amazing amount for this country.
Yep.
He formed the greatest per capita ballet audience in the world for a country that is supposed to be all about football. I mean, from his own personal drive, his own ambitions, his brilliance for his dancers, his ambitions for them, for the company and everything. He was just wonderful. I takes me hat off to him. Dips me lid.
Dips me lid, yes.
He was a wonderful, wonderful man, and I spent the next 10 or 12 years in that company. I only went for 2 months. So...
Wow. Listen, I'm going to have to stop you mid-stride, because you're starting on another very interesting part. But listen, will you come back and tell us more?
Yes, I'll tell you all about the colours of my life.
Good. Wonderful. Well, that was Bill Akers. He'll be back with us for... Meanwhile, we're going to have to stop this episode of Interludes.